Hello, everyone. I want to thank you all so much for being here with us today for this really exciting panel, Distribution in the Age of COVID-19. My name is Masashi Niwano. I am the festival director at CAAM, the Center for Asian American Media. Our festival is called CAAMFest. I'm so excited. We have a panel of amazing filmmakers that you all get to talk to soon. I'm going to introduce them in a minute. Before I do that, the concept or the reason why we are here today is as the coronavirus continues to take its toll on the US, theaters remain closed and filmmakers are finding new creative ways to premiere their films in 2020. We will talk to Asian American filmmakers and publicists about the different virtual theatrical scenarios being tested and how they are reaching audiences and how this may become the new normal in film premieres perhaps well into the year 2021. This panel is brought to us by ADOC, Asian American Documentary Network, and CAAM. So I just want to quickly talk a little bit about each organization. First off, ADOC is a national network of over 600 Asian American documentary filmmakers, both award-winning and emerging filmmakers that work to increase the visibility and support of Asian Americans in the documentary field. ADOC is committed to sharing ideas and resources, provide mutual support and mentorship, and advocating for equality, equity, and diversity in the production and distribution of nonfiction storytelling. ADOC was started in 2016 by Grace Lee and S. Leo Chiang. They have a film database of Asian American documentary films on their website, and recently started releasing hashtag AsianAmCovid stories to disrupt mainstream narratives about Asian Americans during the pandemic. Lastly, to visit them, go to a-doc.org and follow a-doc on social media at a-doc network on Facebook, Instagram, on Twitter. About CAAM. So CAAM is the Center for Asian American Media. We are the largest media arts organization dedicated to presenting stories that convey the richness and diversity of the Asian American experience to the broadest audience possible. We do this by funding, producing, distributing, and exhibiting works in film, television, and digital media. We have 3 funding opportunities that include CAAM Doc Fund, providing production funding to independent producers who make engaging Asian American works for public television. Documentaries are eligible for production or post-production funding and must be intended for public television broadcast. Awards typically range from $10,000 to $50,000. The CAAM Documentaries for Social Change Fund offers grants for social issue documentary films that highlight Asian American narratives. This fund will provide much needed resources to projects for research and development and in early production. Lastly, thanks to the Sundance Institute Respond and Reimagine Plan, CAAM and ADOC are offering emergency grants up to $1,000 for Asian American filmmakers who demonstrate financial need as a result of COVID-19. For CAAM's deadline, it's August 31st. So for more information about our grants, I should also mention as the festival director, we have our next mostly virtual festival, CAAM Forward, on October 14th through the 18th. But for all of that info, go to caammedia.org or follow us on social media. So as I mentioned, we have a lot of amazing panelists. I'm going to go through some quick bios on each panelist and then we'll start the conversation. For full bios, you'll see that in the chat and in other spaces. So first off, we have S. Leo Chiang, who is a Taiwanese American filmmaker based in San Francisco and Taipei. His most recent film, Our Time Machine, won the Best Cinematography Award at the 2019 Tribeca Film Festival and Best International Director Award at Doc Edge Festival in New Zealand and is airing on POV next month. He is the co-founder of ADOC and a documentary branch member of the Academy of Motion Pictures and Sciences. Ramona S. Diaz is an award-winning filmmaker whose films have screened at Sundance, the Berlinale, Tribeca, IDFA, or IDFA, and many other top-tier festivals. All of Ramona's feature-length films, Imelda, The Learning, Don't Stop Believing, Everman's Journey, and Motherland, have been broadcast on PBS, either on POV or independent-led series. Sami is an Oscar-nominated filmmaker who work has screened at Toronto, Tribeca, and Mumbai film festivals and have been supported by the Sundance and Tribeca Film Institute. The Last Out, Sami's most recent documentary with Michael Gassert, won a special jury mention at the 2020 Tribeca Film Festival. With over 2 decades of PR marketing and award-winning PR marketing for award-winning documentary films, indie features, and broadcast content, David Magdael and his company, David Magdael and Associates, has become an important leader in the field. From Oscar award campaigns to theatrical releases to broadcast premieres, Magdael is one of the top media strategists in entertainment. Bao Nguyen is an award-winning Vietnamese-American filmmaker based in Los Angeles and Saigon. His past work have been seen in New York Times, HBO, NBC, Vice, and PBS, among many others. His latest directorial effort, Be Water, a documentary about the cultural icon Bruce Lee, world premiered in competition at the 2020 Sundance Film Festival and was invited to prestigious festivals such as Cannes, South by Southwest, Telluride, San Francisco, and Hong Kong. And lastly, we have Jenny Shi, a Chicago-based documentary filmmaker who is passionate about social justice issues regarding people of color. Her debut feature documentary, Finding YINGYING, was set to premiere at the 2020 South by Southwest Film Festival and won the special jury recognition for Breakthrough Voice. This is a great collection of filmmakers. I want to welcome you all here. So we're going to start with a few questions and discussions. I do want to mention to people who are out there, please ask your own questions in the chat box. In a little bit, we'll start to open it up to audience questions. But, you know, for this panel, David, I wanted to bring it to you. I know that you started talking to Leo, ADOC, and others about what you're seeing in the entertainment field, talking to other filmmakers. Can you talk about that and why you think this conversation is important?
Yeah, sure. I mean, right now we're living in this time, you know, where, especially for filmmakers and all of us on this call, for films that were coming out, we're looking at how are we going to get these films to market. I mean, I remember when South by Southwest had decided they were going to shut down. I was at True False Film Festival. We were like, oh yeah, we're going to go next week. We'll figure out what this virus is going to look like when it's shut down. That was like the last trip that we all took. The last time I was on an airplane. But then we looked at, all the filmmakers that were impacted by that, and everyone was so disappointed, and everyone was like, oh, what do we do? And then we had films that were going to Tribeca as well. And so there was this, huge kind of like disappointment of what was going on there. We were also looking at, on the PR side, we were going to be starting work at getting Ramona's film out, 1,000 Cuts, on the PR side. So that's something we had to talk with PBS Distribution, like how are we going to get this out there when there is probably not going to be any brick and mortar. So at the beginning, everyone was like in this kind of like this fuzziness, and I wouldn't say it was a confused state, but it was more like a questioning, like how do we do this? What do we do? And there was this kind of a sense of doom and gloom. And then, but we kept looking at like, okay, but we just have to force ourselves to take a look at, did this system really work for everybody? Or, now that we're in this, we had to come up with new ideas of how you bring these independent films and these films to the marketplace. And so that's what it's been forcing us to do. And then we started seeing the virtual cinema starting to slowly start to come out, whatever that was. I mean, a lot of us who were in the film festival world were working with, platforms like Cinesend and Eventive and things like that for ticketing and showing, films online anyway. So then we started to look into that. And then you saw a lot of other films were doing that as well. But let me just fast forward to where we are now. And this is like what, March, April, May, June, July, August, like 4 months later, right? And it seems like we're still in stay at home for a lot of us. So we thought, here's an opportunity now with virtual cinema to really reach audiences and to really see, if we can, it's all an experiment. I think there's so many possibilities and opportunities, I think, for all of you and all of us that are working in the film side of things to take a look at. And that's why we wanted to have this discussion. The exciting thing is, if you take a look at all the people on your screen, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 that have films that are either come out this year or they're about to come out. And they're like even like 4 or 5 more that will also be coming out. So it's an exciting time for us. as Asian and Pacific American documentary filmmakers, and for all of us as filmmakers, and it's happening. So we have to take a look at, how do we get this out there? Can we use virtual cinema as, you know, one of those platforms? Is it, you know, I think it's going to be there for a while. You know, is it part of the new normal? I think everything that we saw in 2019, we just threw out the door. You know, we work a lot on awards things, and we're just looking at, I don't know when we're going to gather, but I think for us, it's leveling the playing field for a lot of these films that don't have a Netflix budget to throw parties or to take people to dinner and things like that. But now people are going to be forced to watch these films at home and be able to vote on the films, you know, on a more level playing field versus being coerced to go get drinks at the Chateau Marmont. So I think it allows that aspect for that. I mean, that's just my opinion. But I think you see that happening, and I think that could work. And it's really going to be on the strength of the film, whether it's going to be, you know, people are going to look at that. But I think going into virtual cinema, it also allows you as filmmakers to really look at who your audience is, who you really wanted to make this movie for, and how you can penetrate to reach them. So that's why we just thought, so Leo and I were talking, because, you know, we thought, let's bring this up, because we know Ramona, how many theaters were we in Ramona? Turn your mic on. How many theaters were in? I think almost 70, right?
Yeah, it's like almost 70. So instead of doing platform, we're actually opening wide, which for an independent documentary, you don't open wide usually. You do a platform release, you know, like slowly build word. But this way, it gave us an opportunity to say we're nationwide, and we are truly nationwide. And that couldn't have happened, or, you know, maybe for some films, but not for an independent doc, right? Yeah, so there's some silver linings, but, you know, obviously as a filmmaker, I mean, I went through the stages of grief, right? Because as filmmakers, we want the audience, we want to meet the audience, we want to meet the community. I miss that. You know, I just don't want to be in Zoom all the time. But the reality was, like, coming out of Sundance, right? 1,000 Cuts coming out of Sundance. And then when PBSD and Frontline boarded the project, that was around March, April. We were still basically in denial, right? We were like, oh, we'll open in the fall. It'll be like, you know, it'll be like normal. We'll have theaters every. But then we realized, what are we talking about? We have to be realistic. So I think March turned into April, and then we just took that leap of faith. And, you know, with David really saying, we got to do something now. We got to think ahead of really everyone else, because even if we open in the fall, there's probably going to be a bottleneck, right? Because everyone's trying to open in the fall. And so we said, okay, let's open earlier, August, and then the conventions even earlier. But it took a lot of hand holding for me, because it was a leap of faith. It's not how I want to do it, but because of the film, it's very relevant. It has to be now. And now I'm seeing, now that we're out, I'm really seeing the silver lining, because we're out in a lot of places. We've gotten good press. I think we've gotten good ink on the film. And also, people are doing their own little, I mean, I know it's not the same, but they do like after parties, and they invite me personally. They reach out to me and say, can you drop by? We're having a watch party. And I do for like 10, 20 minutes. And it's not the same, but it's kind of, it is sort of touching the audience and reaching out and having conversations. We're doing a lot of live talkbacks, which I think really help to anchor any screening. We learned that early in the process. But it is embracing the moment, for sure. But realizing that you miss, and I miss the chit chat, I miss popcorn, I miss all that. But then there are silver linings, definitely, and we must really, we have to seize it right now. And I'm really glad David talked me into it. How long? Like 2 hours in the sun, David talked me into it.
What we also found was that, like, publications like Washington Post, New York Times, LA Times were also reviewing films in the virtual cinema. And that was, for us, a draw in terms of like how we can get that out. Because when we talked to the assignment desk at those publications, we asked, well, what are you looking at since nothing is in theaters? So they're looking at what's coming up on streaming, like Netflix, Amazon, all that. What's coming up on TVOD, SVOD, all that. What's going to be, and then what's going on in virtual cinema. And then, you know, so we thought, well, look, if we can get, you know, reviews coming out of there, then that will help, you know, build that audience to maybe find, you know, these films. Because I think a lot of people are at home looking for content. I know I am. I can't find nothing that I really like to watch. And I pay, sometimes I'll drop $20 on some film and I'm like, dang, why did I do that? You know, but if you can find good content, and I look at all these people on this call, you guys all have worthy content. People really feel like, wow, I'm really so glad I spent the time and the money to watch that.
Thank you.
Yeah. So what we needed to do really was educate the audience on what virtual cinema is. That's really what we needed to do first thing out the gate, right? Because in the face of Hulu and Netflix and everything else they have, why are they going to then spend $12 on a film? A lot of people. So you have to tell them, well, you're also supporting their local theater.
Yes.
Because you can't choose which theater you want to support. So if you're in New York and you want to support Film Forum, we're in Film Forum, right? Then they can buy and it benefits the Film Forum. So it's also educating them, because that people were confused. Virtual cinema, we're buying a ticket, we have to go to the cinema. You really have to spell it out. And I think we found a way to make that message clear. And people are now getting it.
Thank you, Ramona and David. Yeah, I want to, David, you mentioned all the amazing filmmakers out in the world. We have a representative here of amazing filmmakers who have projects. And I do want to say, you know, for Ramona and David, I do love this kind of embracing the moment, right? I do see this anxiety, a lot of questions of what's happening. So the more we can get together with these panels, I think is really helpful to learn from what we're all doing. But then also moving forward, whether it's ADOC, CAM, other organizations, there are people who are continually thinking about this as well, that there are opportunities in this. And that's what I'm hearing, David, from you. If we can really think about it, not as this as a Band-Aid or as something we have to do, but a real great opportunity for us as storytellers, I think that's a great way to go forward. I do want to bring it to the rest of the panel. I guess I'll call on the filmmakers, but maybe just let us know what your current project is and how you're dealing with virtual screenings, maybe your festival strategies. Jenny, let's start with you.
Yeah, sure. So my film, I'm the director of Finding YINGYING, and it was supposed to have its world premiere at South by. And as everyone knows, it was actually the first big film festival got canceled. We learned that a week before our trip to South by. So at the very beginning, like, we didn't really know what we are going to do, because later we learned that there are more film festivals got canceled, and a lot of our film festival in spring either got canceled or delayed. So we don't really know when we can, get the film out and get the words out. So at that time, we kind of, exploring different, possibilities. We were even thinking about how about release the film in China first, because this film is about a really high profile case here, and both for the Chinese people, it's it's a sensational case and everyone know about it. So maybe somehow like the release in China could help, our overall release distribution strategy. So we also started to talk to our friends and also distributors who are handling virtual theatrical release. We are also thinking about that. And I think everyone, we were just talking, just to be patient, because we don't really know what's gonna happen next. And later on, we just feel we are so grateful, because a distributor actually bought the worldwide rights to the film eventually, and we were able to carve out the China part. So that's the exact, perfect scenario we wanted for the film. So right now we are working with them as they are developing a distribution plan for the film. And we know they're interested in limited theatrical release later this year, most likely virtual. And it will before the film gets broadcast or streamed. And the exact dates, it totally depends on them. But we are closely working with them right now. And in terms of film festival, I think in later this month and also September, October, there are some film festivals coming up. And most of them, they are geo-block, and we will go through the list with our distributor to make sure they're okay with all these. And we are also going to have a conversation with them about the festival strategy. And I think that's where we are. And we are just really grateful that finally the film gonna meet the audience. And even though we're not going to be, you know, a physical screening or a physical gathering, it's good that we can get response from the, you know, audience, and hopefully we can have impact campaign at some point to either virtually or whatever works best for now. Because we really want to get the film out as soon as possible. It's so relevant, and the family themselves, who are the main subjects of the film, they really want people to hear their story as soon as possible. So we also weigh in their thoughts on the film. Yeah.
Thank you, Jenny, and congratulations.
Congratulations.
Some of you next.
Sorry, did you say my name?
Yeah, I did.
Okay, so you guys know this is all live. Yeah, well, we had the fortune to premiere Be Water along with Ramona's film at Sundance. And, you know, it was actually the first time I met Ramona, and we were just like, oh, it's going to be great to be traveling to all these festivals together this year and, you know, going through the circuit. And then things soon changed. And we were also invited to South by Southwest. And just like Jenny, a week before the festival, we were informed that South by Southwest was canceled. But, you know, I was very grateful that we at least had our Sundance premiere, and my heart definitely breaks for so many filmmakers who were planning their South by Southwest world premiere. I actually got stranded because I was living in London at that time, and I'd come to America for the festival run. And, you know, in LA, there was a stay-at-home order, and so travel was not recommended. So I ended up staying in LA, and I've kind of been stuck in LA since March, and I just decided to move here. Why not? I shouldn't be like traveling at all. And during this time, Be Water had a lot of changes in terms of our distribution strategy. Originally, we were planning to, you know, do a broadcast on ESPN. ESPN had financed the film since the beginning, and we were going to do a broadcast towards the end of the year. This year it would have been Bruce Lee's 80th birthday, so we kind of wanted to surround the broadcast around that, and then do maybe a late summer, early fall theatrical leading up to the broadcast with the festival run for about the first 6 months of the year. And that all changed, obviously, with the pandemic, and it hit ESPN a bit harder since no one was playing sports. No one was playing live sports, and that is the majority of ESPN's content. And they moved up a lot of their non-live sports content, like The Last Dance. The Last Dance was originally supposed to come out a week before the NBA Finals, and since the NBA season got postponed, they decided to move it up to March and, sorry, I should say April and May. And that also forced us to rethink when we were going to have our broadcast. And it took me a while because I've been working on the film for about 5 years since the conception of it. And I always had this dream of like, getting to, you know, Bruce Lee, being able to see Bruce Lee again on a big screen. And it's such a kind of amazing experience, especially for young audiences who have never seen Bruce Lee on a big screen. And that was one of the reasons I made the film, is to introduce kind of the cinematic genius of one of our, you know, Asian American heroes to a new, younger generation. And that all changed. And not to sound cheesy, but we had to be fluid like water in terms of our distribution strategy, right? We couldn't be rigid in the traditional sense of where the film was going to play and how it was going to look in the long run. And so ESPN was like, you know, we know we had the strategy that we had been working on for a year or two with your film, but given the circumstances, would you be open to doing the broadcast first? And this was before the Academy rules had changed. You know, as a documentary film that plays Sundance, you're always thinking about possible Academy qualification. And I was pushing as hard as I can, like, what, you know, can we just wait a little longer to see what's going to happen? And you can't predict, especially in this environment, what's going to happen. And at the end of the day, we had our premiere on June 7th, and you know, everyone was staying home. Everyone was quarantined, so we thought it was a good opportunity for people to watch it at home to grab a really wide audience. But you know, a week and a half before June 7th was, you know, obviously the horrible murder of George Floyd, and so many people went out and protested peacefully, as they should. And it was hard for me, honestly, to be talking and promoting my film during this time where I wanted to talk about the horrible injustices of America. And what we found out, that there was a lot of overlap in the themes of our film and what was going on in America in terms of solidarity between the Asian and Black community, and sort of racial injustice, and not just racial injustice against Black Americans, but racial injustice against all, you know, BIPOC communities. And whenever I was talking about the film, we would sort of pivot the conversation to talk more about what was going on with Black Lives Matter, and like where Bruce Lee would stand on this issue, because it was important for me that, you know, Bruce Lee was very informed by his relationship with his Black American friends like Kareem Abdul-Jabbar and Jesse Glover. And so it was, you know, a strange time to be promoting the film, but after it came out on June 7th, I received so many kind messages from especially the Asian American community, but also a lot of, you know, BLM activists who kind of used Bruce Lee's philosophy of being water, and even the Hong Kong protests, to inform their own tactics when they were dealing with police and you know, the violence that they had faced. And so that was really inspiring for me when I would hear Black Lives Matter activists say, you know, we just had COVID, we had just had this moment of grief, and now we have this really kind of moment of anger, but your film felt like a sort of inspirational, uplifting story that we needed as a break from all this. And I'm really grateful for those messages. And I couldn't have predicted that would be the audience, and that would be what people would take away from the film. So again, you have to be flexible to the time that you're living in and rethink a lot of these models. And now, you know, the film has been broadcast. We had to reject a lot of film festival invitations since it had, you know, our broadcast. But at the same time, a lot of festivals are being flexible given the time. So I think reach out to festivals that you think, oh, maybe you've already played it on the internet or things like that. They want to, if your film kind of matches their audience, then everyone is coming together in many different ways, not just the filmmaking community, but obviously the distribution exhibitors. And we've been lucky enough to play a lot of drive-in, you know, screenings. And that was something, you know, ESPN was a bit nervous about doing virtual screenings, just given security. And now at this point, we've had our broadcast, you know, 2-3 months ago. So they've been open to more virtual screenings, but looking at the restrictions and security parameters, just saying like, oh, it can be geo-blocked, or it could be limited to the first 500 viewers, things like that. So if you're having kind of concerns about future distribution, just make sure you're having conversations with those distributors, but also with the festival programmers who can kind of curate your film to their audiences, and also look to drive-in screenings. I mean, they are expensive, but a lot of local governments are hosting their own drive-in screenings, and you can reach out to like local municipalities and ask them like, oh, I think this film would be great for, you know, your city. And if you have shorts too, I know a lot of filmmakers who want to try to get shorts out. If you have a short that is, you know, look at different features that are playing. If they match, you know, with the subject of your short, people come really early to these drive-in screenings, and they're just sitting around waiting for the sun to go down. It's a good opportunity to get your short out there as well, I think. So yeah, to repeat what a lot of the filmmakers have been said, you have to kind of rethink your model. You can have your mourning period and cry and you know, I'm sure Ramona, Jenny, and I have had those moments, but we just have to again be flexible and realize that this is happening to everyone, and figure out a way how our films can bring people together. I think that's a really amazing thing about being a filmmaker right now, is that the few opportunities where people do feel like a community is watching a film together, either virtually or at a drive-in in a safe way.
Thanks, Bao. Yeah, a lot of great things in there. I think we can talk about drive-ins a little bit later and some other opportunities to exhibit work. I think the key word I got from that is fluid, right? As far as we move forward, everything that was set in kind of the structures, we have to be a little bit more fluid as storytellers. Sami, how about you go next?
Yeah, first, thanks for having me. You know, this is really valuable. I think even, you know, having like a festival, like a sort of, we were going to premiere at Tribeca and we're going to have a big festival launch. But honestly, like, just to be real, the biggest thing that we struggle with is just the lack of information and the lack of transparency in the business. And even at the best of times, you know, like David was saying at the top, like 2019 feels so far away. But even then, you know, you're struggling for information. It's like, okay, what is the market for a film like this? And there's so much smoke and mirrors from distributors and sales agents and the market. And now that's like totally compounded. And again, to be real, like the thing I worry about is that it's going to be a period of sort of wealth and power consolidation in these big companies, the companies that are left standing, that even the smaller distributors who have had an incredible track record of, you know, showcasing international or diverse stories are going to fall by the wayside. And independent filmmakers are going to be increasingly squeezed because it's like the model is like not viable right now. Because I spent, it's almost exactly 6 years I've been working on The Last Out. And actually the first time I met David was at IFLA in 2016. I remember telling him about the film and he was like, oh, that's a great idea for a film. And fast forward 4 years of struggle. And we're finally, you know, we were at a point where we're going to, you know, platform and launch it into the world. And then COVID struck. So like, to be honest, we're still struggling with that. Like we have like a robust festival launch. You know, the festivals that were scheduled for later in the spring and the summer, you know, mostly were canceled. But the fall festivals have had that lead time to pivot to do some combination of drive-ins or virtual screenings. So we're having like a robust festival launch in the fall. But like in terms of sales and distribution, we pulled back our film. We were going to use Tribeca as a launch into the market, and we still haven't gotten out because we're uncertain about what's out there for us. And I think that's like, you know, again, to be real, it's like that's the struggle. It's like not having the information. What are the conversations that are going on, you know, at Netflix, at Amazon, and how are the finances of the business shifting, and what will 2021 look like? And this also reflects, you know, all of our careers, because it's like, how are we going to work? How, you know, I mostly tell verite stories, intimate verite stories, and it's like, how are we going to be able to shoot verite safely? We'd like to think that there's going to be a vaccine in 6 months, but what if there's not? And so the way that I have sort of made a name for myself and found a career is with that verite. But how do you pivot now? You know, I'm thankful for like venues like this, just to you know, just to gather and discuss and share information and even try and answer those questions that filmmakers out there have. But that's sort of what's kept me sane over the last couple months is, you know, was talking to Diane Kwan about Jenny's film, and like comparing notes about that, and you know, talking to David too, like a few months ago. And you know, I think we have to figure this out together. But again, I take it back to that worry, that fear of the consolidation of wealth and power in a few companies, and how can we as filmmakers make sure that we're resilient and we're able to, you know, at a moment when there is more an appetite for diverse stories, to make sure that we still stay in control of those stories.
Thank you, Sami. That's great. Leo, how about you?
Yeah, what Sami's saying is right on. I think that's something that, you know, certainly that's what ADOC is trying to do, along with all the other partner organizations that are out there, Brown Girls, you know, CAM, VC, Firelight. I think we're all trying to make sure that that the filmmakers gets a say in the new normal, right? What the new normal is. So our film, you know, my film, Our Time Machine, actually has had a very different experience compared to everybody else here, because we actually were released in 2019. We premiered at Tribeca, won an award. We actually had a full, almost an entire year. I mean, we had like our last 10 or 15 festivals got canceled and cut short to kind of shift it around, but we ended up playing at like 50 festivals around the world. So we had a full festival run. But for us, the challenge was that we actually were planning on doing a small theatrical release earlier in the spring. That was always the goal. And when you know, when COVID hit, everything kind of went haywire. And you know, we had been having these conversations with potential distributors and different bookers, and nobody knew what was going on. You know, nobody knew when things were gonna, you know, go back to normal. We still don't. I mean, it was so naive of us to think that like, in a few months, things will go back to normal. So at some point, you know, by about, you know, April or May, it was pretty obvious that, you know, for virtual theatrical was going to be the way to go. I think the first doc that I knew that did that, I always pronounce that name wrong of that film. Dave, maybe you can help me. Pahoki, or what was that film? Maybe I'm pronouncing it wrong. That was the first film that I saw that had a virtual theatrical release. And that actually sort of got me curious to start to ask around, you know, what is that? How does that work? You know, what does that mean? Who's doing this kind of work? I had been having conversations at that point with several theatrical bookers. And some folks were like, yeah, that's interesting to look at. Some folks are like, well, we don't know what that means in terms of like your rights with your streaming partners. You know, if you're trying to get qualified for AMPAS, you know, we don't know how good that will do, et cetera. So, but I think as more and more films start to roll out, it became obvious that that was kind of the way to go. And for us, we were initially going to hire a booker to help us, you know, get the theatrical bookings, because we weren't partnered with a large distributor. But I was like, well, you know, if you're going to charge me $7,500 to book, why don't I just try to do it myself? Right? Like, I think at first we thought, okay, if we get 5 theaters, that's great. You know, we can do like a virtual version of New York, LA release, which is what oftentimes an independent documentary would have. And that would be a success, you know, for a lot of the films. But once we started get going, it was obvious that a lot of these independent film theaters were starving for good content, because they, you know, even though they may or may not, you know, they may not be making the same amount of money that they would if this was like a live, you know, a traditional situation where people go to the theaters and buy tickets. It's a way for them to keep active. It's a way for them to stay on their audience's, you know, consciousness. It's a way for them to just be active and to kind of keep the branding of their theater going. So like, you know, I started doing these, like early July or maybe mid-July. And then as of now, we're booked in 40 theaters. So, and we just kind of did that all ourselves with helps. Clearly what we did was like, we have friends in different cities. We asked like, hey, do you know the programmer at such and such theater? And I think you'll be surprised if you really think about it. You actually have a lot of contacts in a lot of these places that you have not activated because you haven't had to before. But if you're an active filmmaker in a town that's outside of the hubs, right? They're probably already friends with the programmer of the art house cinema in that city. All you have to do is reach out to like your friend who's a professor at University of Arizona, your friend who run the film festival, right? Like a lot of us, Asian American filmmakers, we have a network of Asian American film festivals who we can reach out to, and they already regularly partner with some of these theaters, and they can, put you in touch. So we were able to kind of do it that way and able to get connected with right now 40 and then counting. So it's interesting to think about this as, like I'm gonna guess that this is what's happening now is temporary, but the new normal will have some version of this. I don't know how much. I don't also know how many of these independent theaters will make it through the pandemic. So a lot of them will go away. I just posted a link to an IndieWire article that you should read, that there was some talk about like how like 10, 15, 20% of the screens will go away in the country in general. So, but from the perspective of us independent filmmakers, especially from those of us who tend to work without the backing of a big distributor, we, by all means, our film has actually been a very successful film. In the film festival run, we've won a lot of awards. We've gotten a lot of eyeballs. We're going to be on POV. We've done well. But normally we would have been booked into the 2 or 3 theaters. Now we're in 20 times the number of theaters. I know that when David and I talked, Dave mentioned that the box office is like 1/5 or 1/10 of their regular box office. Even figuring that math in, we're still ahead. And on top of that, we're not paying for walling. We're not paying for, most folks know that documentary theatrical release is actually a money-losing venture. It's actually, a publicity cost, really. What you're doing is you're using that to get reviews. You're using that to elevate the profile of your film. So when it gets on streaming, people will know what the film is. You might get considered for some awards. So for us at this time, we've saved all of that publicity cost. So that's, for me, is an exciting part of this. So I think that for those of you guys who have a feature-length film out there, you might want to consider doing this. I mean, I don't know, I'm not sure I'm sure everybody's experience will be different, but it's an interesting option. I don't know about shorts. I think shorts would be more difficult, but what Bao said in terms of like pairing up with the feature, that's an interesting idea. I also don't know what's going to happen when some of the theaters are now starting to reopen, what that means, etc. So yeah, that's
thanks, Leo. I know, Ramona, you have to go soon, so I want to make sure you had an opportunity. Anything else you want to add to this conversation?
Yeah, so 2 things. We don't mean to be prescriptive, right? Virtual cinema is one, and it also depends if you're, look at your film. If it's relevant, if it's now, then I would suggest do it, because I don't think theaters are going to open this year. So that was a lot of the thinking that went into 1,000 Cuts, because it is a very relevant film, and getting it out there before the elections, pre-elections in this country was key as well. So that went into that thinking. But so that's one. You really have to think for yourself if it's the right thing for you. But the second thing too is opening weekend is not opening weekend anymore, right? It doesn't even mean anything anymore, because there's really no real estate. your film can be up there for as long as, well, if it opens, then that's a whole other ball game, right? Then you can have a discussion with the theater, but for as long as you really want, right? So for beyond the 2 weeks, maybe the month. So it's, so those are all the things that you need to consider. And there's something to be said going to, especially the press, when you say, well, we're out in 60 theaters, right? Virtual cinema. And even if, and the box office, I think, will grow because people are now getting used to the idea of virtual cinema. Because when it started, really people had no idea what the heck is virtual cinema. Now that they're getting used to the idea, we're seeing numbers go up in the smaller theaters that we didn't expect. Because now people are saying, oh yeah, okay, I'm also supporting that small theater and I want to support this independent film. So I think once it gets to be not the new normal, but the normal for now, you know, people I think will sign on and there will be bigger, you know, not blockbuster numbers, but, you know, higher numbers. And also it's very transparent, right? You see exactly what you're selling because it's the distributors, it's not the theater who's seeing the numbers. Isn't that right, David? Right? I mean,
no,
PBSC, right?
You're exactly right. And like you said, is it the new normal? I think it's an option. You know, like we're all saying, it's really an option if you want to go that route. It does take work. It's not going to be just because you put it up there, oh, people are going to find it. But I think as filmmakers, you guys all know who your audience is and who you can really kind of target. And if there are community groups that you're already working with, like, for example, Leo, I think you're working with the Alzheimer's organization. So it's getting out to them and saying, look, you can, you know, find that theater that's closer to you that you can, like, you know, click onto and purchase that. So you have all these different marketing opportunities too. And with the press, it's no longer just opening day that you have to have your press. So for example, with Ramona's film, 1,000 Cuts, we knew going into it that the New York Times wasn't going to review it on opening day, but we knew they said, we'll do it next week. And it's similar to what we do with Netflix. A lot of times those reviews and features will come while, in the, like maybe the first 2 weeks while they're out. And so with hers, it ended up being the following week, and then it ended up being in print, and then it ended up being a critic's pick with a color photo. So as a publicist, I'm like gagging because like, dang, this is so great for us, right? But at the same time, it's great for the film. So all I'm saying is there are opportunities that could be stretched out. So it's not like, oh, it has to come out on this particular day. I mean, on our end, in my company, we're starting our own kind of like platforming kind of thing with Eventive. Sitting at home watching Black Lives Matter, being here in the pandemic and trying to look for content. We're trying to find these films that didn't necessarily have a distributor, but had maybe a broadcast, you know, kind of like what, you know, Leo was doing. And so we're going to open on August 28th with a film called Mr. Soul, not an Asian American film, but it's a film about a Black man in 1968 to 73 who had his own TV show and just put Black pop culture and introduced it to America because he felt that was the right time. It was during the Black Power movement, Civil Rights movement. Then you look at what's going on here now in this time of revolution and in this time of a cultural shift. We need to hear this man's voice. So I called up the filmmaker. I said, what are we doing with this? And she said, oh, you know, I'm just waiting for a distributor. And that was the key. It's like, let's not wait. The time is now. Let's figure this out. This is what it's going to cost. Let's see what we can do. So like what Leo was saying, so Vince Johnson, who works with me, he and I said, let's set these up for these films that we've been working on that we know that may not have that platform already, but we can do the work and work together and see if we can do this. So we're starting our company called Open Your Eyes and Think MF. And we're going to find those films that we can help push out there. And then it becomes a plus side for our filmmakers, especially for our filmmakers who are from the BIPOC arena. They have the harder time because the gatekeepers who are at those distributors don't look like a lot of us. The people who are selling our films don't even look like a lot of us. Maybe there's 2 Asian people there are 3 maybe. You know, so it's like, rather than sit there and whining about what we don't have, let's work with what we do have. And what we have is us. You know, I'm looking at these comments going through this talk, and there's community building that's here. There's community building with the theaters, because the theaters, like Leo said are sitting there empty, but then if we can bring them good content, like you were saying, Leo, they're looking for that. And so when we started, we thought, okay, I know Greg Lemley at the Lemleys, we know Rick at the Roxy, we know the Maisels, and we went to them, we said, we got this film, we're looking to put this out on X date. And they all said yes. We started that, and then it snowballed. Every time we shared the film with them, they said, we want to be a part of this. Or we saw this in the film festival, we want to be a part of it. We want to be a part of that voice. And so there's, all I'm saying is there's opportunity. And then I just need to give a shout out to Bao, because Be Water, I know you were like trying to figure out, oh, why do we need to go this early? When your film hit, we had just come off of Asian Pacific Heritage Month, and we had working on the Asian Americans documentary in May, right? And that blew it up for our own community. So I'm just talking about our own community. They were all excited. Then here comes Be Water. And you've got this iconic man that a lot of us who are old school knew him, and we were, you know, he was our hero. And there were a lot of the new people that like, oh, we didn't know him. And now they do. But the timing for that with the Asian pandemic, you know, the Asian virus or whatever they were calling it, came at the right time for all of us as Asian Americans to be proud of who we were and who we are. And so maybe that wasn't why you made the film or how it is, but I think that was the byproduct, which really engaged a lot of people that I saw online talking about Be Water and how you have to see it. But wait a minute, where is it? How come it's not on? And then everyone was sharing when it was going to be there. So there was opportunity. And then with your drive-in, I think your film is really one of the, you know, it's one of those films that are very drive-in worthy because you can gather people to watch them. The documentaries have a hard time drive-ins, but they have to be events or eventized. It can't be like a whole run, you know, because we know drive-ins are for a lot of the action-y kind of films. But again, it's looking at what that landscape is, figuring out what works for your film and what can really engage that audience and who we can reach. But I think it's a time for opportunity. And that's what we looked at when we said, okay, who are these films that aren't getting out there? So we're gonna open with Mr. So August 28th on 58 screens. Normally, if we were gonna make an Oscar run, we'd be New York, LA. And it's like, who's gonna go? And then even if we were open in the time of COVID with no vaccine and the theaters are even open, who's gonna go sit in a 50% theater, you know, and pay money to see a documentary? They're gonna go see Tenet. They're not gonna come see, you know, 1,000 cuts. They're not gonna come see Our Time Machine. And let's be real. I mean, it's sad because that cinematic experience is great. And for Sami, you have a brilliant film. It's just getting more people to see it, because once people find it, I mean, I've been lucky enough to see, I think, all the people's films on this. You know, I've worked on Finding YINGYING for South by Southwest. I've seen Be Water, I've seen Last Out. All of these films are so great and neat and deserve to be out there. And I think, you know, waiting for a theater to be open, you can do that. But, you know, if you want to, go forward like what Leo's doing. You know, I think Leo's a good example. I think there's opportunity, but it's also work. It's not easy, and it's not gonna be like, oh yeah, I'll just sign the contract and it's gonna happen. People aren't gonna show up, and then it's education. So for Mr. So, we're getting Blair Underwood to do like this 30-second, this is how you find my movie. And he'll just put that on, we'll just let that go viral. And then also too, I think the talkbacks are really important. You know, people don't know, we're so zoomed out, but if you can get somebody sexy that's on there and really build that, you can build that into. Sexy is really important.
And also live talkbacks are really important, as opposed to recorded Q&A, right? There's something about live talkback that you can recreate this excitement. So live, if you can have it live, that's really key. And if you're thinking of doing this, so what happens is, okay, 60 plus theaters, right? They're all tweeting for you. So help them. Give them social media assets that are ready to go, right? Which we did. So it's just one click and they're ready to go, and they're all tweeting. We've reached for 1,000 cuts. I've heard from so many people I haven't heard from in years who found the film, especially with Lemley in LA. I mean, people who are like Hollywood people, right? And they're finding the film because it's really, you really have to push on social media. And so help the theaters. If you have 60 theaters, 50 theaters, they will all tweet for you, or they will put on IG, on Instagram, or whatever, Facebook, but help them do it. Have social media assets ready to go. And so it's easier for them. Yes, it's work, but you have to be really smart about it. And it's like when we started Facebook, we joined the boycott, right? We couldn't even advertise on Facebook because we were joining the boycott. So all those shares were organic, and they still they still came because of all the theaters were pushing at the same time. And also community partners are key as well. So if you can get on community partners to help you push it, that's also really important.
You know what was a really great example too, for what we really kind of mirrored was what the John Lewis Good Trouble did. They not only did theaters, but they also went out to community groups to be part of the revenue share. They also went to churches. I mean, and of course you can do that with that film. But I'm just saying, we just looked at like, wow, look what they're doing. And this is what we can do. And if we can dig deep, we can find those partners. And also too, people are looking for your film to get behind, and they will get behind it, and they want to have those bragging rights. Yes, I'm showing, you know, Our Time Machine. I'm showing The Last Out. Come here and, you know, buy it off of my site. You know, and you support me, and you're supporting independent filmmakers, you're supporting independent, you know, theaters as well. So again, I say the key word is community. And this is what we're building in this time of like unknowing. And the good thing is there is no wrong answer. Anything that you do is great. Yes, there's no transparency and we don't know. And I hear you, Sami Khan, but I think we just need to jump out there and just do it. I mean, your film, like I said, your film is brilliant. We just need to have more people see it. And if we can, and if your distributors or whoever your broadcast end game is allow you to do some virtual film festivals, use that as a marketing tool. You can limit the number of people that buy tickets in a festival, 250, 300. We did that with Ramona's film during Hot Docs, AFI Docs, some of these other places. We thought, okay, we wanted to be there just to get the word out so it wasn't quiet, but then we can limit it. We limited like we were going to actual film festival, and we limited it to 250. You know, who knows if we would have gotten that if we really would have been in that film festival, but we'd at least had 100. But I mean, there are ways that you can make this work. And if your end broadcaster or streamers open to doing that, why not take advantage of that?
Yeah, but we also found that capping streams is more important than geo-blocking, right? Because you want it out there and you want it wide. So if we were, what did we do? What other film festivals did we do?
Hot Docs, we capped it only we geo-blocked.
Oh yeah, AFI Docs too. AFI Docs was like, but it was nationwide. It was not geo-blocked, but it was capped. And that was more important because then it went across like nationwide.
Well, and also too, you create this thing that if you did not get in those 250, you didn't get in, and you created this FOMO more.
Yeah, exactly.
Damn, I want to see it. So at the Asian Film Festival, we had capped The Donut King, which is amazing too, by Alice Gu. Put that on your list. It's coming out. Greenwich. We're not working on it, but I'm just telling you that movie is so good. We capped hers at like 150. It was like a surprise thing that we did at the LA Asian Film Festival. That sold out in like an hour, and people were like clamoring for it, but we couldn't put another screen up, and now they want it. So you create this atmosphere of like, oh, this is exciting. And, you know, it's like going to a film fest when you can't get in. You feel like, bang, I'm a loser, right? So you can create that online too. And I think it bodes well for you. Let me shut up, sorry.
You're on mute, Masashi, or we can't hear you?
Uh-oh. I think Masashi's mic went away. I guess we have to moderate this ourselves.
All right.
All right, we're gonna chat. Masashi can figure out the technical stuff.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay, sorry about that. Thank you. So I was just, saying, David, I want to be respectful. We got so many questions from our audiences on different platforms. So I want to make sure that all of our filmmakers here have an opportunity to answer some of these really important questions. And because there's a lot, if people can keep their answers relatively short, that would be helpful so that other filmmakers can also contribute. And I'm going to try to mash some of the questions into pieces where people can pull from. I think the first one is, you know, what I'm hearing is there's a lot of opportunities out there for filmmakers to get their audiences. And I think for a filmmaker, that hustle has always been there. I think in the virtual world, it's a little different, and finding your audiences is key. We're getting a lot of questions for people who have short films, who are making short form films right now, but also independent films that haven't played the festival run yet. So they don't have that visibility or recognition. So for filmmakers who are currently kind of trying to figure out their strategy, I guess one question would be platforms you have all found. Eventive is something that, David, I've heard you say a few times now as an option. But if anyone has any thoughts for people who are making films that may not be doing the traditional theatrical run, but ways they can find their audiences and still make 2020 a success for them. Any thoughts there from filmmakers?
I guess I'll jump in. I think both Ramona's and my film are on Eventive. I've actually become kind of an Eventive convert, and we haven't even started, showing the film yet. I just love it because I think it's built, and I think that first of all, I think those guys are really building it for the independents. They have a reasonable fee for somebody who coming in and with one film. A lot of the virtual festivals actually have run on Eventive. VC this year was run on Eventive, I believe. I know just like 3 or 4 other films that we've shown in as a virtual festival ran on Eventive. You capture the emails of the people that order your film. You can do accounting. Like the way that we've done it is that we've gone to the theater and we basically proposed we acted as a traditional distributor. So we went to them and say, let's do a 50-50 split. So we're getting half the income and the theater's getting half the income. But because it's on our Eventive platform, we're the one paying the theater instead of the other way around. Like, there's so many more opportunity for you to control how things work and who to reach out to, et cetera. It's been really exciting. David mentioned how the John Lewis film partnered with churches and with a lot of the community organizations. Basically, the way that they've done it, just to clarify, is that instead of going to a local theater and say, hey, we'll do 50-50 split with you, they're going to a church and say, we'll do a 50-50 split with you. So it becomes a fundraising opportunity for the local, nonprofits that you could partner with. One of the things that we're looking into, a lot of the live theaters are dark right now. Our film has a huge live theater element. The core of our film is a live performance on stage. So we're actually approaching some of these theaters and say, hey, we'll do the same thing that we're doing with the movie theaters with you guys, because you guys need programming. Our film is a good fit for you guys. Do you guys want to do a joint release? So what we're doing is we're giving them half of our box office basically for their list, right? For their marketing power, for their Twitter followers, for their whatever. So I think that all of that, a lot of folks who are thinking about rolling it out, themselves can do. And with a platform like Eventive, you could have a lot of control over that, and you could do these really flexible and inventive way of doing it. So what I don't know is, when the movie theaters are open up again, when these live theaters in our case have programming again, what that would mean. That probably means just other partners that you should be creative in terms of approaching.
Thank you, Leo. Any other thoughts from our filmmakers about platforms or ways of showcasing your films virtually?
I would add just really think outside of your typical movie-going audience, since it's not people who necessarily just have to go to the theater anymore, and reaching out to associations and organizations like Leo and David were saying that are related, but maybe, again, thinking outside the box. Like with Be Water, originally we had, with it being on ESPN, there's like a big sports audience and a lot of martial arts audience members and action cinema fans. But then we got asked from like psychotherapists associations and relationship groups and groups that I hadn't imagined at all thinking about Bruce Lee. But there's certain things in terms of his philosophy and how his relationship with the Black community were conversation starters for a lot of these groups. And so coming into the fall as well, when most universities are just virtual, right? They're all online classes. That's like, it's, you know, you're closing that gap in many ways that was harder before, because someone would have to go out, maybe watch your film physically. And so think of it as this virtual world that you can more easily contact someone, and they're more open to doing a virtual screening of your film for their class. And so, especially short films where, you know, there's a certain, you know, most classes are like 90 minutes. So you can do like a 30-minute short and then a 1-hour discussion with the class. So again, just reiterating what everyone say, you have to be really flexible and think differently.
Thank you, Bao. Anyone else? Another question that has come in is, you know, we're hearing different things as far as if you are finished with your film, get it out there, because you can't rely on the theaters opening up, like put that power in your own hands. But also with Ramona, one thing that I remember hearing is, you know, if the film is really relevant to now, get it out there and find your audiences. I guess for people who have completed films, how do you, what advice would you give them as far as figuring out if this time is appropriate for them to release their particular films? And if so, well, let's just start there. Any thoughts on how people can kind of make that determination for their films? Any thoughts on that from anyone?
I think it's all content, right? It's driven by what your film's about, right? So for example, again, going back to 1,000 Cuts, it is about press freedom and disinformation and the erosion of democracies. It's very now, and it's very relevant to pre-elections, going into elections, even in this country, right? And globally. So obviously there was no reason to wait. But if there's a reason to wait and you can afford to wait, that's also an option. See what next year looks like for you. If it doesn't stress you out too much, right? That you can wait, that it's more like only going with what I know. Like my previous film, if it were my previous film, Motherland, I would have waited. I would have sat on it and wait till next year. If you can afford to, right? If it doesn't, again, stress you out, then wait. But it's really about content. Look at your content and see what is going, or what, you know, is it about, if it's about COVID, maybe you can't wait. Maybe it's now. Or maybe you can wait. Oh, that's one topic that you don't know, right? Maybe people are just so sick of COVID right now, they cannot watch a COVID film, but maybe next year they can watch a COVID film. So that is something, that would be one topic that's, I think, would be tricky, right? That's like reading tea leaves. And that you need more discussion and figuring out, because also there's a lot of COVID films, right? So maybe next year might be better. And then you can craft it, so it's more a reflective film, you know, or than of the moment. Maybe.
Thank you, Ramona.
Can I just add to what Ramona was saying real quick, just in terms of like finding the right time, in terms of subject matter, you know, I've been fortunate to have conversations with some of the big streaming companies in terms of the content that they're looking for. And they are not looking for COVID stuff right now because, again, we're so into it and we haven't had a moment to reflect. And they're getting so many COVID pitches. And what, you know, I don't want to tell people what type of films to make, but in terms of the market, it seems like people want uplifting films, inspirational, aspirational films, because we're in such dark moment in our reality that usually you turn to something on television, on your laptop, on a big screen that's the opposite of what you're experiencing sometimes. So that would just be a recommendation. And in terms of strategy, you know, you think for the last few months, people haven't been producing a lot of content. And if you want to time it out and think, okay, if no one's shooting anything, and everyone's kind of distributing things that have been shot already, when is the sweet spot? I know this might be contradicting what I said earlier about being fluid, but if you want to be strategic about it, think about like, there will be a moment where there isn't a lot of content, where these streamers, these people are going to want to watch new content more. And if you have something that's just in post right now, maybe wait a little longer, because again, the market might change. But just, you have to always be on top of things and really take initiative and really hustle.
Thank you.
Talk to people. Talk to David.
Yeah, talk to David. Everyone
David.
Talk to people. Talk to people in the community. us who've done it, you know, and figure it out if it's for you or not, right? Just to David.
And also do the research. I mean, you know, do the research. That's what's really gonna help you. Like what Leo was doing. He was trying to see, and Leo's very methodic, because Leo will like take you to like facts and figures like forever, and it's like, okay, Leo, just decide already. But seriously, he did his research and he made this decision, because you had a lot of people going like, hey, pay me $10,000 and I'll get you this, this, and this. And Leo was like, I don't know if I need to be doing this. So we were talking about what we were doing with Mr. Soul, and we said, okay, maybe we do it, you know, that way. And I'm so glad that he decided to do how he was going to do, because I think you have more control as a filmmaker. You know exactly who you're going to go to. And again, it's engaging. And with Sami, you know, I don't, has the movie played anywhere outside of where you were supposed to, like at Tribeca? Has it done anything outside that?
Yeah, so we actually just played Rooftop Films Drive-In. It was like the opening night of their doc series that they're doing. So that was the first physical screening. I couldn't go, unfortunately, because of COVID, but my partners on the project could go, and you know, we participated. Like Ramona said, we had like the live Q&A, which was really important. And, you know, to hear people, I mean, it was actually, I get chills describing it because it has been such a long road, but the film finished, and you could hear, instead of applause, you hear cars honking. And like after the Q&As, then you hear the cars honking. It's like, oh, wow, people are seeing this film. It's not just, you know, existing online. And, you know, our film, we did, just in terms of the distribution side, we did make the determination that unlike 1,000 Cuts, there wasn't anything urgent about it. You know, our film is about baseball. It's about the underside of pro sports and migration, which is always relevant, sadly, in the United States. And so we're being more deliberate with that. But at the same time, we're pushing it on the festival side to have like that robust launch. It's really picking up what David and Leo have been saying is the other thing, and I think as Asians, it's something that we excel at, is like just this idea of kind of like gathering information and like hacking the system, and like figuring out those ways, whether it's talking to someone, you know, you're talking to David, talking to Leo, you know, talking to Ramona from Jenny, like learning from this experience, and then figuring out that through line. And someone asked about short films in the Q&A I saw, and having gone through, you know, we had quite a successful run with our film last year, St. Louis Superman. And that is like in large part because of Poe, the producer. She just is able to like hack the system. And it's like build this momentum of, you know, you don't necessarily need, for example, to qualify for the Academy Awards, you don't necessarily need to play Sundance or Tribeca or whatever. You can play like these other qualifying festivals and start building this momentum, and your film gets seen by, you know, people in all these different corners, you know, internationally, and then you just build this momentum. And I feel like now there is, you know, in terms of approaching people, because there aren't these gala events. You don't go to Tribeca, you don't go to Telluride, and it's not sequestered. You can just approach people. And not like, you know, the executives at Netflix are just going to answer you, but you can at least try for that, you know, because it's democratic that way, where Alex Gibney and, you know, he's just having Zoom calls too. So why not just have a Zoom call from some emerging filmmaker? And they claim that they're interested in new voices. So just go for it, find a way, and like hold their feet to the fire.
We shall see, right?
Exactly, yeah.
We shall see. You know, they're gonna say, they're all like leaning into this moment. Yeah, you know, we're gonna get behind you guys. It's like, okay, let's see where you're gonna be in 2021. I mean, because the proof is gonna be in the pudding. But at the end of the day, all of us and those people on this panel, if you guys are really wanting to work with them, hold their feet to the fire. If that's where you want to be, or start your own. Don't be waiting for them to have to like give you the okay. You know, we don't need that anymore. I'm sorry, we do need that support, so don't get me wrong. But at the same time, don't sit there and whine and wait for somebody to come to you, because they're not coming.
Thank you, David. Jenny, I wanted to make sure you had a chance to talk. Was there anything that we've been talking about you want to jump on And if not, I know you're also thinking, we're focusing a little bit on the US, but you're thinking of a global market as well. So any of your experience you want to share?
Yeah, actually, I saw there's a question about, if the virus is under control in some countries, is it realistic to think about like premiere it or distribute it in somewhere else? Like for us, Finding YINGYING, because like I think early this year, the situation in China, like the COVID was really bad. But later on, because of their very restrict control, I think things are getting better now, and theaters actually are opening. So people are going into theaters to watch films. And for us, actually Leo actually helped us think about how to navigate the distribution in China. And we did hear from, China distributors who are interested in release the film actually like very soon, like before the election. So for us, if the US distributor didn't came on board, we are actually, very close to plan out something like to release the film in China. And on the other side, I feel like it also depends on the film itself. Again, because the story is about Chinese woman, Chinese student coming to the US. And the whole story is basically everyone knows that in China. And for us, from the family's perspective, they really want people in China to see this film. So why not do that? So that was what we were, planning on. So like from my perspective, I think first, if the story is really important to, certain countries, and second, if this is part of your goal to distribute a film in that country, why not to do that if it's safe to do that right now?
Thank you. Any other thoughts from panelists that you want to share?
I would just like also, sorry, I did talk. I would just like, it was interesting because like to go back to Sundance 2020, I was there, not with the film, but just there. And I remember on stage, they brought up A-Doc and Brown Girls Doc Mafia. And I think that really like thinking about that really crystallizes the moment we're in. And who would have thought like 10 years ago, 15 years ago, that at Sundance, like the organizations with that kind of radical mission would be embraced by the mainstream. And because of the work of protesters in the streets, because of COVID, and because of the work of A-Doc and Brown Girls Doc Mafia, they're even more part of the mainstream. And so for filmmakers out there, take advantage of those resources, and the step on the shoulders of those giants who have come before us. I know I'm thankful for that, for the work that Leo and David have done for years to open up that space. And I think A-Doc's amazing. Like just the slide, like the resources you can get in A-Doc are incredible. And I imagine that's how a lot of the participants in the chat have found us. So I think that, when I was younger, I craved something like that. And now to see that, I think is incredibly empowering.
Well, I also want to piggyback, on the fact that like a lot of us of this generation, with Ramona and all of us is CAAM and VC, it's because of their support that's how we've gotten here. And now, we're all trying to pay it forward. And I think we're all encouraging everybody to kind of come together and form a community, right? Like Dave has been mentioning the word community, Karen in the chat, Karen Chin, who is like somebody who I want to be when I grow up, is just like wants us to build our own system. And maybe it is time, and maybe that's the natural next step, is for us to take advantage of these new tools and start to experiment and start to pour some resources into it. So we are not sitting here waiting to hear back from Netflix and from HBO or whoever else, but we can just get the film out there and we can target the communities that the story matters to. So,
Yeah. Thank you, Leo. Yeah, and you mentioned visual communication. So one thing I wanted to mention, you know, the independent cinema world is a microcosm of a lot of filmmakers, distributors, brick and mortar theaters. So definitely when we can go out and support. I also want to mention that there's a lot of Asian American, Asian Canadian festivals that are going to have their own festivals coming up in the fall. So the more we all are engaged and support films that you want to see, maybe through that festival. I know there's a lot of festivals who really, it's a tough year. So the more we can remind ourselves there's festivals in our spaces. And one of the opportunities is you can now experience a festival that normally is not in where you would be, but now you can experience that virtually. So every festival, I know this, has a different perspective, a different kind of curatorial eye. So keep an eye on all of that. I did want to mention, you know, we're talking about distribution and virtual cinemas, and there's a lot of opportunities. We've been talking about that. I see a few questions on who might be left out by doing virtual cinemas. I think, Ramona, you mentioned, you know, having to educate audiences, but not everyone fully understands how to do a virtual cinema or may not have that capability. So in a world where we're depending on Wi-Fi, virtual cinemas, are there audiences that you're trying to engage who may not have access? And if you are starting to reach out, what are tools, ways you have reached out to other audiences?
I mean, I'll just take that one on our end, especially with the film, like with Mr. Soul that we're putting out. We had to go outside, you know, so we could reach a lot of the communities that really wanted to see it. So we're partnering with Image Nation and Soul Cinema, and they have their own platform. So we've now, so it's not just us doing the Eventive platform, but we're moving into having them join us as a partner. So it's looking at those partnerships. Same thing with, I'm trying to think, some of these museums that they have access to. Portland, Maine, the Portland Art Museum in Maine, the Museum of Fine Arts in Houston, the Berkeley Art Museum with the Pacific Film Archive. So it's looking at where are these spaces, where are the people at? We have a film that's going to be coming up about Dave Grusin, and we're looking to partner with other places like that where we know where the audiences are. So we're trying to find places that we can partner with. And if we're in that virtual space where there is a revenue share, then that makes it even more valuable to them. And then it gets more also that buy-in. So there's that, but I think it's also, again, this is all experimental, right? So everything we're trying to see what's going to happen and what's new. And as Ramona said, it's an education process of teaching people how to find it. But I think people will find it because it's become much more easier, you know, than before. So what excites me about this time, like we're all talking about this time and everybody, I look at this chat room and that we're all in, not just us as panelists, but there's some people in here that are amazing. You said Karen Chin, I see Ursula Leong. I mean, you know, Melissa Bijani's in here, but there's some people that we can go to that are in these chat rooms that are in the space that you can ask questions of, because I know that they're all community folks that'll answer your questions for you. And then if we look at documentaries, even just this fall, in addition to the ones that we're all here, you know, talking about, you've got Ursula's film, Down a Dark Stairwell, you've got The Donut King, you've got First Vote that's gonna be hitting on PBS, which is really a wake-up call for all of us if you're looking at voting and what that looks like amongst our own community. I mean, so there's a lot of opportunity. The other thing too, can I just say, you looked at Bentonville this year, right? The film festival, and who took home the top prizes? Two women who were Asian Pacific American. You know, both in the narrative sense and then also in the documentary sense. And then there was a big article that came out yesterday in Variety about how Asian Americans really showed up at Bentonville with films. So just know that this is not just a moment. Yeah, 2018 we had Crazy Rich Asians. We're like, oh, this is a moment. No, we were trying to turn that into a movement. And this is where we are. At the end of the day, you're gonna ask yourself in 2021, what did I do in 2020? And you can say, this is what you did. Everybody in this room, this is what we did, because we're trying to create this community so we can move ourselves forward, so we're not reliant on the other giants that we normally they want us to go to. I mean, they're good, it's good to have them, so don't get me wrong, I'm not dissing them, it's just now is the time to like think outside that box.
Thank you, David. And sadly, we are out of time. So I want to thank everyone for participating and all of our amazing filmmakers for being here. I do want to mention this is the dialogue continues, experimenting will continue on. I know there's filmmakers out there. We've been focusing on distribution. There are filmmakers who are starting their films now and all in between. ADOC is a great space for you all to connect with people on this panel, but also in general who can help kind of express what they have gone through with this, with their own program. So I recommend people go there. Let's continue the dialogue. Thank you all again. Have a great rest of the week and see you next time. Thank you.
Bye.
Thanks, you guys.
Thank you. Thanks for having us.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, ADOC. Thank you, Cam.